Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session on a Tuesday. I was about to say Wednesday then, wishing the day away. Tuesday afternoon, 1:30. Talking about wellness action plans. We'll just wait for Andrew to pop up onto the digital stage for us. It should pull him up in a second. Just a few housekeeping items while we wait for Andrew to pop up. If you're having any issues or anything, use the chat function. Just put your kind of notes and stuff in there just to let me know. I'll be facilitating the session. If you've got any questions for Andrew, please use the Q&A function that you can see there just to the right hand side of participants. Add your questions in there. And then if you like somebody else's question, just give it a click and it pops it up to the top and we go with the most popular. Here we go. Andrew is with us. He's just going to put, let me just pop my notification do not disturb on there as well. Sorry about that. Okay, so welcome to this session with Andrew Berrie, the lovely Andrew Berrie from Time to Change. And Mind, Head of Workplace Wellbeing Programmes at Mind now. So congratulations on that, Andrew. Andrew's going to be talking in this session about wellness action plans. These can be used to support mental health and wellbeing of remote workers during this time. Mind have a suite of wellness action plans. They have one for employees, one for line managers in terms of their use, but they have developed the new one specifically for remote workers. They're a fantastic tool. And it gives you those proactive tools, how you can approach conversations around wellness action plans, how you can work with line managers and employees in terms of making reasonable adjustments in the workplace for anybody who does have a mental health condition or is suffering from depression. Because remember, in regards to the 2020 Equality Act, it is law to make reasonable adjustments in the workplace. But really the most important thing about wellness action plans is that proactive tool that they provide you with. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the expert. Andrew, take it away. Oh, we can't hear you though, Andrew.
Let's try that again. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. There we go. There we go. Right, take it away.
Okay, fantastic. I will begin again. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. As Helen has just said, my name is Andrew. I've previously been the Time to Change Employer Program Manager, supporting organizations to really look at organizational practices and support them to have an open and honest culture around mental health, to really support the well-being of staff at all points through their employment journey, from recruitment to induction, all the way through their kind of experience with managers and different work streams and project groups, through to the point that they may be promoted or they choose to work elsewhere. And as of yesterday, I am the head of Workplace Wellbeing Programmes for Mind, overseeing a portfolio that includes Time to Change, but also our work with universities, some of our regional programs, and also some of the programs that we'll have upcoming in response to the coronavirus as well. So today we're going to be talking principally about wellness action plans and how this kind of really important for conversations between line managers and their staff. But I thought first it was perhaps also useful to provide some context to how coronavirus has impacted the mental health of the nation, for us to really bear in mind when we then go on to discuss some of the practical ways in which we might use a wellness action plan, particularly in the coming months where we might have staff beginning to come off furlough, working from home, or perhaps working in a bit of a kind of blended hybrid way. We all think it's probably quite likely that, not everybody's going to be rushing into the office to be doing 9 till 5, Monday to Friday, or, other kind of working patterns that reflect the events industry, but that there is likely to be kind of a hybrid model for a period of time. So our first statistic today is 35% of those in employment would describe their mental health as poor or very poor. So just over a third of the UK population would describe that they have poor mental health as a result of the coronavirus. This statistic came from about 2 weeks after lockdown for a period of 6 weeks. So it was kind of that immediate period after lockdown and when lockdown was perhaps stricter before some of the easing of lockdown that we saw. But our next slide here also shows how the coronavirus has impacted the mental health of the nation differently according to what their employment status is. So you'll see particularly those that are unemployed and seeking work or those that were made redundant, very high levels of impact on their mental health. So 48% of people would say that their mental health is currently poor or very poor. And again, a lot of reasons for that around purpose, around connection with people, concerns about work and concerns about their financial security and what that means for a day-to-day and for the upcoming months. Also, given the uncertainty about how long coronavirus may or may not be with us and the implications that has for our working and daily lives. You know, if they've been made redundant recently, if they're currently looking for work, it's a very crowded job market at the moment. So concerns perhaps for kind of a more medium to long-term future as well. And then changed employment status due to coronavirus, 39%. And again, that group of people include people that have been made, that have been put on furlough as a result of the coronavirus. And obviously includes a large number of people in events and hospitality, a lot of the people that obviously work in your teams, work in your organizations, but also a lot of your suppliers will fall into this category. And again, a lot of similar concerns around financial well-being, concerns around work. And as we go down, you'll see the more security a person has around their work, the more security a person has around their work day, the more that they might feel that they have a sense of autonomy themselves around their work. We see gradually that there is a slight reduction in the impact that people think that has had on their mental health. And just to kind of underline some of those factors that we were just discussing, these are the key factors that people have suggested have affected their mental health during this time. So amongst the full-time employed, not seeing people you don't live with, so broader friends, work colleagues, anyone from outside your own household that you're immediately living with was the most frequently stated reason for poor mental health. Other reasons included not being able to go outside. And even when lockdown began to ease, this number didn't move too much because people still obviously felt a sense that they needed to socially distance. They should only be going outside for essential reasons. A lot of anxiety around family or friends getting the virus. In fact, more so than any anxiety around themselves getting the virus. So you'll see further down this list, anxiety about getting the virus themselves was 62%. Anxiety about family or friends getting the virus was 74%. A sense of feeling bored or restless, again, popular choice at 73%, but a whole host of different reasons that were impacting people's mental health. And on the next screen, again, you'll notice the contrast between those that are full-time employed and those that have seen their employment status change as a result of coronavirus. So you'll see concerns about work, concerns about significantly jumped on the previous slide. And again, you'll see moderate increases in the number of people that have felt bored or restless and people not being able to form connections or feeling isolated or lonely compared to their full-time employed work colleagues. So again, a whole host of different factors have impacted people's mental health during this time. And one of the key reasons that the Wellness Action Plan is such an important tool is because the coronavirus has impacted all of us quite individually. You know, if you have been working during this time and you're a parent, you've obviously been juggling parenting responsibilities at the same time that you've been trying to work from home. If you're a carer, very similar. Some people have had the coronavirus themselves. Some people have suffered bereavement as a result of the coronavirus. There's been a whole host of individual factors that have hit people in a variety of different ways, and even across a single organization or across a single team. There's going to be a lot of individual factors that affected people's mental health, and mental health is an individual thing. It impacts our responses in a number of different ways, and that's one of the reasons the plan is such a key tool. And just to identify a few of those trends that we've seen amongst those that have been working, there's been this sense of having to always be on for those that have been working from home. Again, on average, people working from home have said that they've been clocking out 28 hours of overtime each and every month whilst lockdown has been in effect. And that's the equivalent of working a 6-day work week. That's a lot of time. And a lot of that is because people have felt pressured to respond more quickly than they would. They've been working longer hours. They've maybe felt that they're having to pick up the work of their furloughed colleagues. Perhaps they're having to adapt, adapt products, adapt work processes, cancel events, postpone events, look at switching events to a digital platform and producing a digital summit or conference. But a lot of work has had to happen during this time that a lot of people have then seen translated into quite a lot of overtime. As a result, we do then see burnout. 43% of people don't feel they have again, whether or not that's because the organization, that's because there's been an increase in the amount of work to do. 36% have said that they felt under too much work pressure for the same reason. And as a result, 48% are working longer and more irregular hours than they would have previously. Presentation has paused.
Hi, Andrew. I think maybe that the Wi-Fi might have paused a little bit. So maybe if you switch, oh, there, is it moving again?
I feel we're slowly making progress towards movement. Apologies, everybody.
Maybe if you just turn the camera off for a second, it might help on the Wi-Fi and connectivity a little bit. So if you just go into audio for you in your presentation, that might help. Okay.
Okay, we seem to be back and going. Apologies for the brief interlude. Something else that we've seen during this time has been virtual presenteeism. Now, for those that don't know, presenteeism is when people would still come into work even when they were still feeling sick. So not being as productive, that might also in a mental health context have involved them attempting to come into work when they are experiencing a mental health problem or experiencing anxiety, and they're not being their kind of authentic selves. They're perhaps hiding or not having open and honest conversations about some of the support that they require to work at their best. And that typically then results in poorer productivity. And during this time, the Institute of Employment Studies have reported that 26% of respondents have continued to work from home despite illness. This could be for a number of reasons. It might be guilt. Again, if a number of your colleagues have been furloughed and you have not, you might have feelings that, if you were to take a sick day, if you were to take some time off, what are the implications for your clients? What are the implications for the rest of the team that are having to pick up that work? A lot of people have also reported that they just find it, again, a little more difficult to justify taking a day off work. At home, if they're already working from the sofa, if they're already working from their bedroom, they feel that perhaps it's harder to make that justification to their line manager. And this is despite the fact that obviously if you are still working from home and you are feeling sick, then if you're working, you're not getting better. And again, you're not working at your fullest and your best, and that it's in the best interest of your health and the best interest of your well-being to obviously take that time off, recover, and then come back to work. And again, 3/4, 79% of HR managers have said that they believe that widespread implementation of home working has encouraged e-presenteeism as a result. And again, the last trend that we're seeing, this social disconnection and isolation. So 1/3 of people have reported feeling frequently isolated, despite the fact that we're obviously now having more phone calls or maybe having more Zoom meetings or Teams meetings or using Teams or Slack or other kind of productivity platforms. A lot of people are still feeling disconnected. Having said that, 29% also say that their boss is not. 79% would not say their boss is good at keeping in touch. So not having those regular check-ins, not having those regular meetings. And as a result, a lot of people might worry that decisions are being made without their involvement. They might not have good ideas of deadlines, of priorities. This is obviously a very quick and shifting landscape in which decisions are being made quickly and people are needing to respond quickly. Those kind of different product adaptations might need to be implemented at speed or at scale. And communication is really the cornerstone of making sure that the well-being of your staff is protected and that your staff know what is expected of them. And again, having an understanding of what is expected of you, what your priorities are, is a key factor in workplace stress. So ensuring that your staff are aware of those kind of key priorities is really important. So this then brings us on to wellness action plans and how this tool can be used to support the well-being of your staff. Slide has stuck again. Excellent. So what is a wellness action plan? A wellness action plan is a framework for a really useful tool that was built on a tool built in the 80s called a wellness recovery action plan. And now a wellness recovery action plan really focused on the kind of support mechanisms, different levels of support you could put in place with a medical professional around your recovery from a mental health problem. What Mind did is really took that kind of fundamental framework, worked with the original author to translate it to something that was appropriate for a work context. And again, our wellness action plan really is a system and framework of questions that supports you to have a conversation with your line report around what supports them be mentally well at work, what kind of coping mechanisms can they put in place, what do they need from your employer or you as a line manager to support them work at their best, and kind of preferences for communication, different things that you might want to look for in terms of communication style or early warning signs, any kind of key triggers to be aware of, but a whole host of questions that really enables you to have a solid understanding of what makes your employees well and what keeps your employees well. And as a result, and kind of in response to the coronavirus, we've gone and revised this wellness action plan and put together a new version that reflects the fact that people are working from home, reflects the fact that for many people, this was not a choice. For many people, this was also something that was kind of deployed at speed. I know in my case, we literally were told the morning of lockdown that we weren't coming in. So having to, adapt to a significant change in work and processes at speed and kind of recognizing that that's going to have an impact on the mental health and well-being of staff. So how does it benefit your team? It can be used as a proactive and a reactive tool. So you can go through this system of questions, go through this framework of questions and have an open and honest conversation about what are the things that keep you mentally well? What are the coping mechanisms that you can do each and every day? They're going to support you work at your best. It can also be a reactive tool. So it can, in a similar way to how it was designed in the first instance, be used, for example, or following a period of poor mental health or a period of sickness, to really look and address what were some of the key triggers that perhaps impacted on your mental health during that time. What are some of the things that you've maybe learned now about your coping mechanisms? What are perhaps some of the things that you've learned about how the organization supported you or some of the processes around the organization that maybe impacted on those triggers? And now moving forwards, how can we proactively look to maybe add new coping mechanisms or look to adjust some of those ways of working to ensure that we don't have a repeat of that situation, or as far as possible, we maybe look to mitigate some. It's also really important, I think, at this point to say that it's a really useful tool for yourself as a manager, and going through this kind of framework, going through these questions, going through the wellness action plan with your own manager is really important. Investing time in your own well-being and making sure that you've got some of those coping mechanisms in place. And again, I think maybe an additional point is really just to highlight that it's a really useful reflective tool. I know that I first became familiar with the wellness action plan first day working at Mind, and it was actually the first time that I'd really been asked any of these questions in my career, and really made me think about what does keep me well, what are the things that trigger poor mental health in me, and it can be a really useful reflective exercise, even if you choose not to share it with a line manager or share it with your team. And I think, again, on that point, recognizing that it is a living document. We all have mental health. It is a continuum. There are different things in our lives that are going to impact our mental health. Some, are inevitable. Some, such as the coronavirus pandemic, cannot be expected or anticipated. And again, we are going to always be kind of responding to periods of change. So keeping this document as a living document, looking to regularly review the wellness action plan and ask yourself, are these still the same things that keep me well in this new work environment? Is there anything else that I can look? Working with new stakeholders, working with a different team, working with a different manager. Perhaps there are new ways of working that I need to take account of. And again, as you work with these new colleagues, as you work with these new line managers, perhaps this is an opportunity for you to share some of the things that help you support staying well at work with those new individuals. So what should a WAP cover? Approaches you'll be taking and the behaviors you can adopt to support your mental well-being. Again, these might be coping mechanisms in relation to specific issues that you might be experiencing, or it might be overall things that support well-being. So thinking about the 5 ways of well-being, thinking about some of those things that support you to be active, support you to give back, thinking about some of those things that support your well-being, and support that kind of constant positive level of well-being. It might address any workplace triggers for poor mental health or stress. It might identify early warning signs of poor mental health that your manager can look for. And again, in this new remote wellness action plan, it also looks to signpost early warning signs of poor mental health that people in your household might be able to recognize. Obviously, working at distance, there are some things that your manager is going to be able to recognize, perhaps particularly in performance and some of your outputs. But some of those things, unless you're having very regular Zoom meetings, are things that your manager might not be able to notice. So identifying, is there anyone in your household that you want to share this information with, and what can they look out for? Again, potential impact of mental health on your performance, and the support that you need from your line managers, from your colleagues. And again, in this new wellness action plan, identifying anything or any support you might need from those in your household. So if you're looking to get started with a wellness action plan, there are a number of things that you can do and that your team member that you're looking to support can do. So the first step is to share our guide to a wellness action plan with your team. Whilst doing so, look to kind of set out some of the reasons for doing so. If you're going to be doing this as a proactive exercise, or if this is going to be more of a reactive exercise that you're looking to implement it for, to understand some of the kind of underlying reasons for which a wellness action plan can benefit the team. Looking to ask your team to have a go at completing the WAP in the first instance by themselves, like I was just saying. For many people, if this is the first time that they've had familiarity with a wellness action plan, they might actually find it quite difficult to fill in the first place again. I know when I first filled it in, a lot of my answers to some of these questions were kind of 1-sentence, 2-sentence answers, because I honestly, at that point in time, had little understanding about what supported my mental health. And again, letting staff know that that is fine. Again, the purpose of the wellness action plan is to support them to reflect on what keeps them well. And if that is a slow process, it's a slow process, but it is a progressive one. And then looking to schedule some time to discuss that wellness action plan with them, and we'll get on to some of those stages in just a moment. Your team member can think about what they were feeling when they've been doing well at work, what kind of activities or well-being activities or routines or coping mechanisms have they had in place when they've been working well at work. Thinking about the work environment that promotes good mental well-being for them. Identifying what helps maintain their well-being. And again, like I said, that might be from the 5 kind of ways of well-being, but what supports positive well-being in the general sense. And identifying coping mechanisms that they've used previously and whether or not they've been effective. So as a manager, when you're looking to approach a WAP conversation, these are 9 key principles. Still appropriate for a working from home situation. So the first is to choose an appropriate place, one that is private and one that is quiet. I think, again, it's really important to reinforce that if you're going to be having a WAP conversation through Zoom or through some other kind of video chat platform, that you schedule it in sufficient time to allow the person that's working from home to find a private and quiet space in their own home. Again, if they're working with family, if they're working with flatmates, they're perhaps working in a shared living room, shared kitchen. If they're parenting, they're perhaps still juggling parenting duties with their kids. So giving them appropriate time to really kind of prepare themselves to have that conversation. And for you, similarly, as their line manager, to kind of make sure, you're putting your phone on mute or switching them off, that you're kind of switching off notifications, that you're very much focused on the conversation that you're having with your line report. First step, I'd like to confirm the confidentiality of a WAP. Again, to some extent, this might depend on some of the processes that you've got within your organization or within your team. So again, we would say that a wellness action plan belongs to the individual. It should be confidential to them, but you might have some social norms within your team about the extent to which you share it. So it can be useful to set out what some of those norms are, but ultimately leave it up to that line report to decide whether or not they want to conform to them. So again, an example, in the Time to Change Employers team, everybody in the team has shared their wellness action plan with every other member of the team, so that we all have an understanding of what supports the mental health of our colleagues and how best we can engage and work with those colleagues throughout the year. And as part of our appraisal process annually, we make sure that we do review the wellness action plan. And similarly, one of the kind of things that comes out of our group meeting when we go through all of our kind of team objectives for the upcoming year is to also give like a small update on anything that we've kind of significantly changed or updated in our wellness action plans. Again, obviously entirely up to that specific individual about what level of information they want to share. But it can be very positive to kind of encourage the team to be sharing some of this information amongst each other. And particularly during the coronavirus, when we've all had to be changing our ways of working, a lot of us are now working from home, and a lot of our ways of working have changed significantly. That sharing of information about how we best work with one another is really beneficial. Like we were saying earlier, set out the purpose of discussing the WAP. Make sure an employee knows that they're maybe not specifically being targeted with this wellness action plan, that it is an initiative that you're rolling out across the team or across the organization in terms of addressing how you can proactively support mental health and well-being in business. Or again, if it has followed a period of health, it is part of a return to work process, making clear that, again, it's not targeted, but it is part of that process within your organization to ensure that the organization, as far as possible, is supporting their return to work. Within the conversation itself, encourage the person to talk, ask open, not closed, non-judgmental clarifying questions, but really make it a space for that employee to go through their wellness action plan and provide you the information that you need as a manager on how best to support them. Encourage your staff to open up about any problems they might be currently experiencing, recognizing that in some cases, those problems might be with you as a line manager and perhaps some of your existing ways of working or existing ways that you're communicating with another. Listen, don't make assumptions. Very much underline that encouraging kind of point, that sit, listen to their problems and let them kind of address some of their kind of solutions that they might be proposing. Discuss some coping mechanisms, again, appreciating the fact that everyone has individual factors impacting their mental health. Everybody has individual ways that they're going to respond to that, and really looking to then tailor your support as a line manager to those specific coping mechanisms. And again, do ask your line report if they have any specific suggestions on what support they would like from you as a line manager. Do be aware that, if a person does have a mental health problem that has been diagnosed, they may be kind of covered by the Equality Act, and as a result, they might then be entitled to workplace adjustments as well. If that is the case, you might want to seek specific advice from your HR team or occupational health. But again, be as open and creative about some of these solutions as you're able to be, and ensuring that as far as possible, you as a line manager and you as an organization are providing the best tailored support for that employee with regards to some of those kind of triggers or key issues that they've identified. So again, moving on to our WAP for home workers, we've got a couple of worked examples that have come from my own wellness action plan that we're going to go through, and then just have a very brief kind of discussion about some of the things that you as a line manager might then follow up on, or kind of some of the different coping mechanisms that you might put in place. So one of our first questions is, in your usual working environment, what helps you stay mentally healthy at work? And how might you adapt these to your new working environment? So really looking to encourage an employee to reflect on the things that have supported them be mentally healthy at work previously, recognize the fact that they are now working in a new environment, and what can you take, what can you literally, just continue to do from your previous working environment? What can you reflect on and perhaps adapt slightly for your new working environment? What is different about your new working environment that perhaps presents difficulties or challenges or barriers that you didn't previously experience in your working environment that you now need to think of new coping mechanisms for? So in my own wellness action plan, I've identified that a regular morning routine and time to prepare myself for work was really supportive. I enjoyed getting my coffee. I enjoyed my commute. I listened to a podcast. It really helped me separate kind of my home life and my work life. It supported me to kind of think about what I had to do that day, consult my diary, kind of think about my to-do list. It was a really useful time for me. I know a lot of people find their commute stressful. I'm still getting the Central Line. I loved it. But obviously, whilst this is no longer possible, what I'm looking to do now is still maintain a routine in terms of a regular wake up time, getting showered, getting dressed for work, making sure that I'm not spending my whole day in sweatpants, making sure, I am properly dressed for webinars or meetings, still listening to a podcast, still making a coffee, and, very much trying to replicate something that helps me get into work mode. As a line manager, if you were kind of listening to some of this coming from your line report, what you're going to recognize is the fact that a workday routine is really important to this employee and really integral to them getting into work mode and supporting a good start to the workday. So as a line manager, you're going to think to yourself, okay, I need to respect this employee's time. I need to make sure that we protect that work time at the start of the day. How can I perhaps try and facilitate that? Okay, I'm not going to be booking any meetings before that kind of regular start time. I'm not going to be trying to have phone calls in that time when I know that they're kind of getting ready at the start of the day. Maybe you're going to encourage them to block that out in their calendar so that it is kind of protected time, and similarly other colleagues don't see that. And maybe you can encourage that line report to share what that new routine that you're trying to build is. So again, myself, I'm very transparent with my line reports and with my manager that I look to get started at 9:30 in the morning. I work typically 5:30 till 6. But being very clear about kind of, this is the time that I'm having coffee and getting myself started. This is when I'm planning on logging in, being very transparent with that kind of work day that I'm trying to build for myself whilst working from home. Thinking about triggers, there's a question on what triggers are you facing in your new work environment. For myself, again, that is specifically the physical work environment. So my home work setup is a small desk in my bedroom. It's a very small commute now. We've got 2 steps from my bed to my desk. It's not as comfortable as the open plan office in Stratford was. I'm working from a personal laptop, which again clearly has Wi-Fi issues given the small interruption we had earlier today. I don't have access to a printer. I don't have access to all the kind of IT facilities that I had in the office. And thinking, about communications and, how I work with others, obviously being physically distant from some of my work colleagues can present an issue. So it can be more difficult to contact team members, particularly at speed. So if you're trying to, just finish an email, finish a pitch, finish a document and get it off your desk, a quick question to a colleague that was sitting a few desks over can now become quite a prolonged series of communications to now get in touch with a member of staff and get that maybe just 1 sentence or 2 sentences that you need to finish a piece of work. So again, as a manager, you're going to want to listen to this. Obviously, there's very little as a manager that you can do about the physical workspace. But again, you can maybe talk about making sure that you're, getting up, that you're stretching, that you're going for walks, that you're using your lunch breaks to be able to get away from the desk, get away from that work environment, cool down, have a proper lunch, have a proper break. In terms of, communications, you might be thinking, okay, we need to make sure that we're establishing key ways of working with colleagues. We're needing to think about the platforms we're using. Can we be using Slack or Microsoft Teams to replace some of those I've got a quick questions and moments in time? What processes can we consider that might simplify how we're working with one another? Can we consolidate some ways of working? But again, a lot of these come to team dynamics. So if you are kind of having a wellness action plan, it can be really beneficial, as I was just saying earlier, about sharing it with your immediate team to discuss what some of those dynamics with one another are. Early warning signs. How would you respond? Again, thinking about any early warning signs. Usually in the office, I'd say if I didn't wear foundation, call an ambulance. I would pay less attention to my appearance, might stop taking breaks, eating lunch or meals. Now I've kind of said, those things are still likely. That is still how I respond to stress. But recognizing the fact that working from home, I am more flexible now with when I'm taking my lunch breaks, when I am taking my other breaks. I'm obviously dressing more casually now, working from home. I'm in a t-shirt, in a shirt if I was working in the office. I'm no longer wearing makeup whilst I'm at home. Obviously, all the hairdressers are kind of closed, so I've not been having a haircut recently. So whilst these things are still true, recognizing that there has kind of been a new benchmark set. And again, something that as a line manager you're going to want to do is identify these and then talk about how you might be able to specifically pick up on these. So through regular check-ins, through Zoom, through WhatsApp, being led by the person on how they want to have those regular check-ins, how often they're wanting to have, which platform best works for them. Impact on performance. If I'm stressed, I struggle to make decisions, identify priorities, might start multiple pieces of work, but struggle to finish some of those. So a bit of a fuzzy head, I might just be, really struggling with completing a piece of work. So something that's useful for me is for a manager to perhaps help me review my task list, or help me kind of with delegating. Again, a lot of people during this time of coronavirus are really struggling with being able to identify priorities, because they're not sure what is the business organizational priority in this time. A lot of senior managers are also struggling with those questions. But again, as a line manager, you're going to want to identify, okay, what are those mechanisms throughout the workday to have team meetings, have regular catch-ups? Can I support you? Identify on your to-do list what the priorities are. How do I, as a manager, communicate to the team what some of those priorities are? Obviously, it can be difficult at the minute, so perhaps thinking about how you identify short-term, medium-term, and long-term priorities, and how you can support people decide what maybe needs to be delegated, what might need postponed, what might need cancelled, and what is kind of integral. Then the very last slide, support from others. Again, typically this section might kind of summarize or conclude a lot of the other coping mechanisms that you've discussed throughout the rest of the Wellness Action Plan. So again, regular catch-ups with managers and team members to provide updates on work is really useful to knowing what is a priority and what in the short, medium, and long term is important. And again, agreeing those new ways of working and streamlining processes, knowing the best way to work with the rest of the team, what dynamics are supporting the well-being not only of myself, but everybody else that I'm working with. We're now Q&A.
Yeah, here I come. I am. Fabulous. Such a fantastic session, Andrew. Thank you very much. Really, really incredible. I as someone who manages bipolar in the workplace and has spent probably 20 years of my career in events hiding that fact, not being able to bring my whole self to work for fear of judgment and stigma, and all that. I can't speak about wellness action plans positively enough. They're such a brilliant tool, but what they're great at as well, if you're looking at the culture within, as an employer, as a line manager, if you're looking at the culture within your team, these are probably the best proactive tool that you can do to change that culture above anything else. Because basically what these indicate, isn't it, Andrew, that it's okay to talk about mental health in work, and it's okay to come and have a conversation about your health and well-being at work. And that's the most important factor, that ability to be able to bring your whole self to work. We talk about it so much, don't we, in mental health circles, bringing that whole self. You don't have to put a mask on the office. You can be you. Absolutely.
And what the tool can potentially do, again, for line managers that perhaps don't think they have a sufficient literacy in mental health and are perhaps, apprehensive of having these conversations, what a Wellness Action Plan does in essence provide is a script. And whilst, the conversation is led by that employee about the things that are important to them in managing their mental health, it does give some level of comfort to a line manager in having some of those conversations. And once you've had that second conversation, you realize that actually all the conversation is about being empathetic and compassionate and discussing in an open way how you can support one another. And you realize that actually it's not as scary as you require. And actually, you don't need to be an expert in mental health to be having any of these conversations. Exactly. But for many people and for many line managers, this can be a really good starting point. And like I said, for employees, it can be a really good kind of reflective tool to ask some of those questions that, if you haven't thought about it before, really cause you to have a think about, what are those triggers? What are those coping mechanisms? What, things in my work environment do support positive well-being in my day-to-day?
Yeah. And it's a really, because you mentioned it there, didn't you, triggers. So those triggers, it's a really great tool for you to start to understand what your triggers are. Effectively mental health, to poor mental health. Remember, there's positive mental health as well. We all have, like Andrew said, we all have mental health. It isn't necessarily poor mental health, but the triggers are the biggest impact on poor mental health. And having an understanding of those triggers is a great tool to have in your toolkit, which is effectively what a wellness action plan is. It's like a mini toolkit that will help to keep you well in your personal life as well as your working life.
Exactly. We all have mental health. It's very much a spectrum. And again, our well-being is going to go up and down, and sometimes in relation to triggers that are things that we can mitigate and manage. And, sometimes in relation to life events, if we suffer a bereavement, it's entirely natural for you as an individual to be having poor well-being. That is something that every human is going to experience. So some of these things, again, you can mitigate and manage, and some of these things you can say, okay, let's just accept that we all have poor mental health. And when I have poor mental health, perhaps as a result of bereavement, this is how it's going to play out. And this is how I would like you as a line manager to, have conversations with me. So again, another bit of the wellness action plan that we didn't go into detail today, but is around perhaps your preference for a line manager to get in touch with you. So would you prefer that they had a conversation with you in a meeting room? Would you prefer they sent you an email? Do you want to go outside and have a coffee? And again, in a remote working environment, would you rather you had that conversation through Teams chat? That can sometimes, some people might think that seems impersonal, but someone who maybe doesn't want to have that conversation on Zoom, having that understanding about how best people want to have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's quite interesting, the stat actually that you had at the beginning, the 35% of people in work due to the pandemic. That was actually the stat for the events industry before the pandemic. So 35% of the events industry felt that they had poor or very poor mental health. So that 1 in 3 statistic that we talk about so much on EventWell stages. And so it's safe to say then that there are some employers who are further down the mental health and wellbeing journey than others. So if for anybody who's an employee, how would they go about approaching the line manager, employer who don't know anything about this and kind of say, I've come across this great wellbeing tool. I'd like to use this myself for managing my mental health and well-being. How would they approach it with the line manager? What was the best?
Yeah. So again, if you visit the Mind website, if you find our Wellness Action Plan guide, we've got 2 guides, one which is for employees on how to kind of complete the Wellness Action Plan, and one that is intended for employers and line managers that sets out, one, how to have those conversations in a similar way that I've just done today, but also kind of the importance of well-being in terms of having a supportive work environment, how that benefits the organization in terms of, retention of staff, well-being of staff, some of their legal duties as an employer, but also how it supports productivity. And how if you have a lot of people that don't feel they can be open and honest about mental health problems, that's a lot of people that are not having these open and honest conversations about support mechanisms or reasonable adjustments. And that means that you've got a lot of people that are not performing at their best, or not, are spending perhaps energy pretending to be somebody else, or, talking about a weekend that was fictional because they spent their weekend in bed because they didn't feel they could get out of bed. But from both angles, really making sure that as far as possible, the organization and the line manager is supporting the employee to be the best possible version of themselves at work. So that employer guide that we've got sets out a lot of those kind of key benefits, sets out what is expected of a line manager. And I would suggest in the first instance, going to your line manager, saying that you've discovered this wellness action plan tool. It's used in a very large number of organizations from big to small across all sectors. and providing them with that employer guide that really sets out kind of the business case, but also the fact that it is a very simple tool to use.
Fabulous. There's such a great session. Thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew.
No drama.
If anybody has any other questions, we will be sharing Andrew's contact details after the event in your digital goodie bag that we'll be sending out to everybody. So if you've got any specific questions or anything that you'd like to ask Andrew, is that okay, Andrew? People can
absolutely.
Yep, fabulous. Thank you so much. That brings
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Fabulous. Really good. That brings us to a close. Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you for joining us. And thanks to everybody for joining us on this session as well. Okay. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Bye.